Welcome to another episode of Conversate, a podcast where we engage in conversation. In this week's episode, I, Kevin Bender, am joined by special guest Don Kuiper, our facilities manager at Saints Peter and Paul in Houghton, Michigan. And this week we'll be engaging in a conversation about the new year. We'll talk about Ecclesiastes and wisdom, and what it means to live under the sun. We hope you enjoy it. Morning, Don. I mean, afternoon. Well, it depends what time you're listening, folks. But hey, whatever time it is for you, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. So I got my coffee. Don, you look empty-handed.
I know. I got my coffee right down here.
Oh, what a guy. Well, hey, Happy New Year.
Salud. Como dicen ahí. Like they say south of the border.
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, Don, we're here in the year 2021, man.
What are my thoughts?
It's a new day.
It's a new day.
It's a new year.
It's a new year.
Did you make any New Year's resolutions?
Let
me rephrase that. When was the last time you made a New Year's resolution?
Well, I'm not a strict New Year's resolution type of guy, but I do have thoughts about how I ought to change a few actions or to accomplish certain tasks or jobs. And this year, 2021, the same one popped up again. That popped up in 2020. All right? But I have to tell you what it is.
You have to tell me now.
I got to tell you what it is. Basically, what I would like to do is I would like to write down my memories, okay? Childhood memories, marriage memories, just memories, you know. Mm-hmm. I find that so often an event, a thought, a word, a phrase, a smell will trigger a memory.
Sure. And
I would love to be able to, at that time, just write it down, you know, and get it down. But of course, it's gone, you know, a half hour later, 3 days later, you can't come up with the same feeling. You can't come up with the same, you know, I need to record this. But this year, I will try to sit down and write down some of my memories.
Hey, there you go. Memoirs,
which I have been thinking I don't want to refer to it as that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, that's okay, because I mean that's kind of what it is. Mm-hmm. Because my daughter asked me, Dad, why aren't you doing this? Okay, I mean just do it. Just do it. And then when I begin to think about, well, okay, and then how I want to do it, I have particular thoughts about how I want to do it.
Okay.
I want it to be well written. I don't want it just a scribbled mess that somebody can hardly read, so forth and so on. So I plan on editing this thing. But then you get to the question is, who are you writing this for?
Oh, sure.
I mean, the people who are reading it aren't necessarily going to care about how well it's written.
It's going to be the great historians of the 31st century.
That's right. Well, I would like that to also be true, you know, so I don't want to be, you know, telling something that's not true.
Sure.
But, okay, talk about resolutions. Yeah, I guess I've resolved that I'm going to sit down with a blank sheet of paper and write down some memories.
Well, I think that's really interesting, Don, especially since we're coming into this conversation right after a weekend of worship when, what we read in Scripture was basically there's nothing new every day. It's the same thing over and over and over and over, but maybe not on a micro scale, not on an individual experiential scale.
But I think you have touched on why I don't want to call it a memoir, because there's zillions of them out there.
Oh, sure. And it will become just one more. Yeah. I love that in that first chapter of Ecclesiastes, there's also the part that talks about the eye is never full of seeing and the ear is never. So you don't want to be just another piece of noise floating out there. Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Hopefully I do it.
Yeah. Hey, why not? Hey, actually, here's a tip for you. I read this. If you want to actually do your New Year's resolution, already you're taking the advice, because the first piece of advice is don't say you're going to not do something, because people it's harder to do like a negation. It's easier to do something new.
Okay.
That's more positive, I guess. I don't know. Maybe it's all for the optimists out there. But the second thing is build it into something you already do. So in terms of when you want to be writing this stuff, maybe if you have a ritual, like of something you do every morning, like coffee paper kind of thing, try to just tack it onto that space and time. And it might stick a little easier because you're already in a groove.
All right, we're January 4 today, right?
Yeah, I said it was the 3rd today earlier in an email, but
don't worry about it. Where I'm headed is I've already failed to do it on the 1st. I've failed to do it on the 2nd. I've failed to do it on the 3rd. I've got tonight. I've thought about doing it at night. I've thought about doing it in the morning. I don't do it at night. I don't do it in the morning. I don't do it in the middle of the day. I don't know when this is going to happen.
I don't know, Don. I say go for morning. That one sounds good.
Yes.
Well, but let me ask you this, Don. Now that we're rolling into this is just interesting that I didn't know what was going to happen when we started this conversation,
right.
But here we are, and we're talking about your memories, and
and
I think that's a great goal. I have that same. Actually, I started writing down a little memory of every day.
Okay.
And then my phone got really cruddy the last few weeks, so my pattern has stopped. But what I'm interested to ask you is, in light of Ecclesiastes, life under the sun, everything again and again, like there's obviously a difference, Don, between you and I in terms of life experience and wisdom. And Ecclesiastes is a wisdom book, and you look like you've earned more wisdom than me. So how do you respond to when you hear those words from chapter 1, when you hear, the wind blows everywhere and just goes in circles, and man toils, but for what?
Okay.
And, what's your kind of knee-jerk response?
My response is basically that it's true. That there is nothing new under the sun. And if you are a student of history, you'll soon see that. Some of this stuff is going on in the 1500s. Some of the stuff that you get upset with today, it's nothing new. You want to figure out what's happening in Washington, read Machiavelli,
Okay.
He's becoming a little bit more popular, I understand. And that's Italian politics, I don't know, 15th, 16th, 17th century. You got guys like Cervantes and Don Quixote. It's all the same stuff. And then he refers back to stuff that's even further back than that. So there really is nothing new under the sun. But how does that hit me? How does that hit me? I look at my history and I say, wow, I perhaps had a goal at one time, but I don't know that it actually played out the way I thought it was going to play out. But now looking backwards, which you mentioned today in the sermon, looking backwards, you got to say that God was in it all. I mean, there's no way around that.
Yeah, and I love the contradiction of, because you have Ecclesiastes, and here's this guy saying, look, there's nothing new. There's not a single thing new under the sun. But then you got Jesus saying, hey, behold, I'm doing a new thing. Yeah. I'm making all things new, and it's almost like the Bible's arguing with itself. But here you're saying you've kind of experienced both sides of that.
Sure. I can honestly look back on my life and on Gene and I together. We've been married for 50 years. We look back on the whole trip, if you want to call it that, and say, wow, God was good. Why shouldn't he be good in the future? And there is nothing new under the sun. But why despair? There's no reason to, throw up your hands and wallow in the mud. No.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Well, and it's like right there, you're making a distinction between creator and creature.
Okay.
Right. So we kind of have this. Here's this line that we're going to draw. I mean, this is actually interesting to think about because a lot of times, like if you had a number of words and you said, all right, people, put these in two categories, and say the words were like God and humanity and angels and heavens and trees and frogs. Like, how
Right.
would you categorize those things?
Well, some of them are earthly and some of them are heavenly, I guess.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think most of us, we're going to draw a line like this. And on one side, we're going to put, God, angels, heavens. The other side, we're going to put man, frogs, trees.
Trees.
But even the angels are created.
Oh, yeah.
And even the heavens, in biblical sense, the idea of heavens is stars, it's solar system, it's
Right.
planetary. So even
Right.
the heavens are created.
Yeah.
There's
all
only
right.
one creator.
Right.
And so we kind of have this is Platonic thinking, right? So Plato, I know you like history and philosophy, so
Right.
I'm glad we can chat on this. But Plato, so he was kind of this two-realm thinker, and he has influenced so much of human thought. So
Right.
Plato, it was this idea that you had good and evil, you had the light and the dark, and
Right.
both things kind of came together, and that's why in the world we experience both sides of those things. And so that even kind of affects how we see and think about God and even how we read Scripture. But it's good for us to realize, again, yes, there's a line this way, and there's God the Creator, and everything else is kind of below Him. And like you said, there's not a whole lot of worth in worrying and wringing your hands over
Right.
the things that we experience in life, because ultimately we're under the sun.
Right.
We're down here. I guess if you're listening to this, I've been making lines with my hands that you can't see. So I'm making a horizontal line. God's above that horizontal line, and we're below it. We're under the sun. That's what Ecclesiastes says over and over. Under the sun.
Right.
For those, life is vanity for those under the sun. So you say, looking back on your years, God was good.
Right.
I've been able, it sounds like you're saying I've been able to see now how God was kind of threading and weaving these parts of my life in this direction. But in the moment, maybe it was harder to see.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because we're down here under the sun.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Specifically, and specifics are always kind of good.
Mm-hmm.
My son-in-law asked me about Spanish is a part of my life. It's a part of my brain. If you know me, you will find Spanish coming out of me automatically. Okay, it's something I tried to conquer, and I believe I have come close to conquering the Spanish. Not entirely. Okay, I get to the point here, Don. My son-in-law asked me about something. We were talking about something about Spanish, and I mentioned my high school Spanish class. Okay, I mentioned him my high school Spanish class. He's a history teacher.
Okay, your son is.
No, my son-in-law.
Your son-in-law.
Son-in-law.
Got it.
He's a history teacher. He deals with teenagers all the time. And I said, and I started to talk to him about my Spanish class when I was in high school. I said, well, Judy Savage and I sat in the back, and we were not learning Spanish. We were fooling around too much. All right, and he, the Spanish teacher, moved me to the front. He left Judy in the back. He's probably okay back there. I was in the front. But here's something about that particular teacher. He asked me about my wrestling event the night before. He was where I'm getting at is he was interested in me as well as teaching me Spanish. Okay, so here I am sitting in the front, and Mr. Reisenauer would say, "Well, Dan, how'd you do last night?" And I go, I got pinned, or no, I lost, 3-2. Or I go, woo-hoo, took care of that guy, no problem, I pinned him in the first round. So here was a Spanish teacher, a teacher who was interested in not only teaching me, how to conjugate tener in the present tense, he was interested in me as a person. So my son-in-law, of course, said, hey, do you remember any of his pedagogical, I think that's the correct word,
Yep.
his methods of teaching? Do you recall anything in Spanish class other than him asking you whether you got pinned or didn't get pinned, And I said, no, we just kind of did Spanish, learn your vocabulary, try to pass the test, do whatever. So why am I bringing all this up? Well, that's an actual instance where if you look at my life, let's see if I can do it quickly. My dad once in a while had some migrants pulling weeds on the farm. I maybe had my first touch of Spanish then. And then I get into high school and I start taking it as a language, because if you're going to college, you're going to need a language. Well, fine, I'm going to college. I need a language. So I take the Spanish. And then I end up in college trying to do math and Spanish. Well, forget that. Or math. Forget that. I switched to Spanish. It's easier. And then I end up, relocating Cuban refugees in Los Angeles, which is really the culmination of my Spanish language education. I mean, it really takes you from the classroom to the street. You got to know it. So if you look at that, God's been in that the whole time. If you look back, you see all kinds of things going on. Once in a while, there's a hiatus, but.
Yeah, that's incredible, Don. I mean, no, really, like to think about it and to have kind of the I see why you want to write memoir now. I mean, memories. But no, I mean, in the moment, under the sun,
right.
You don't necessarily see.
Right.
Life can feel kind of meaningless. I mean, there are days when
Right.
you wake up and it's like,
Right.
what's the point? Like, can we just fast forward the clock to 10 p.m. and I'll go back to bed?
Yeah.
But even though you weren't recognizing, when you were in the field
Right.
with those migrant workers or in that class, you're just taking the class.
Right.
But at the same time, God is building and working.
Sure.
I mean, I would argue working through you
Sure.
with the gifts He endowed you,
Sure.
so that one day you could help Cuban refugees. You know what I mean? That sounds like godly work to me.
Yeah.
He's got a heart for the immigrant. That's what He tells Israel in the desert. He said, "Hey, you guys were immigrants."
Some of those immigrants I helped are probably about 55, 56, 65 years old. I mean, okay, you got to go back to 1971.
Sure.
Okay, if you were 5 years old. Okay, if you're 5 years old in 1971, what are you now?
Oh wow.
30, I don't know.
40,
You could
40.
do the math.
I am gonna do. I like math.
Yeah,
You'd be
you do,
54.
right?
You'd be
Yeah,
54.
you'd be 54. Okay,
you're
so
5 years
those little squinkly mocosos, or rugrats or whatever you want to call them, little snotty-nosed kids, they're now 54.
Wow. And so now, and this is where, I mean, again, this is where we start to drift above the sun a little bit, I think.
Okay.
And we can't get there, right? We can't see this, but I wonder we just tracked a fraction of your life.
Right.
And then you think of all the different kids who came through that.
Sure.
And all of their stories now, multiply this out.
Right.
And God,
Right.
this is I've heard it described as the mountaintop view. So God, He's above the sun, so He's on the highest mountain.
Right.
And when you're on top of a mountain, if you've ever climbed one, I've ascended one mountain,
Okay,
pretty proud of that, in Colorado, Mount Albert.
14er?
It was a 14er.
Ooh.
It's like it's one of the tallest, but it's like mid-range in terms of difficulty.
Okay.
But anyways, when you're climbing up at the beginning, you're down in the woods, man.
Yeah.
You can't see but 10 feet
Right.
either side because it's thick woods and,
Right.
and you got the path ahead. But as you ascend, you get past that initial forest, and then pretty soon you're past the tree line. Pretty soon it's just bare rock, and when you look back, you can see so much land that you couldn't see before, and you see these little tiny microscopic dots, and like, oh, that was a semi. That thing's pretty huge on the ground.
Yeah.
And so this is God's view, right? He looks down on earth, and not only, He's not just passive, like we don't believe in a passive God, the watch setter God who just lets it go. Right. God is not only looking down, but He is actively working in all that He sees,
Right.
in bringing people together. Don, I never thought I'd meet you.
Right.
But here I am. Now my Spanish is getting better. Jose Quintero, that's my Spanish teacher. If you're out there listening, I'm still brushing up on my Spanish.
We got a lot of work to do.
You weren't I'll edit that out.
Whatever.
So, but yeah. So it's kind of incredible to think about that. That
Right.
for us under the sun, we got a limited view. But even in our own lives, you get to look back.
Sure.
If you have, if you're kind of given the space, even, I would say to I don't know that everyone reflects like this on their life.
No, I don't think they do.
Yeah, and even you, like you're trying to reflect on your life, and it's a challenge to at least sit down and write down these reflections.
Right. It's mostly for my kids.
Sure, that's good motivation.
So they got something to read. Yeah, it's mostly for the kids. There's a lot of stories there.
Yeah.
They're going to want to read them, I think. You know, even if they don't, I got to write them for me.
Yeah, sure.
Besides, what I found is if you start writing one, you think about three others.
Well, even when you when you first started talking about memory and how it's linked to
Sure.
different senses, and immediately I remembered, and I wouldn't have thought of this the whole rest of the day had you not mentioned it, but
Right.
in college, the cafeteria smelled just like Chuck E. Cheese. And we used to go to Chuck E. Cheese quite a lot when I was a kid. So that was fond memories. And I don't know if that's a positive to Chuck E. Cheese or a slam on my college cafeteria, but
Well, diesel fuel spewed from the back end of a bus reminds me of Mexico. For whatever that's worth.
fond memories.
It's not a bothersome thing.
Gasoline in general reminds me of the bookmobile. That was
Okay,
this.
there you
I don't know if
go.
you remember that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
little
yeah.
bus came to school, had a bunch of
Yeah.
books on it.
Yeah.
I read a lot of R.L. Stein, Goosebumps. I never wanted to. This is where I want to always go above the sun and have the wisdom, because those were the choose your own
Right.
ending books, and I'd always read. You know, it said if you choose this, go to this page, and if you
Yeah.
choose this other thing, go to this other page.
Yeah.
I'd go to both every time because I didn't want to die off. I don't think anyone died in those books, but yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Which kind of brings us to a question, I think, coming out of all this discussion on life under the sun and such, but so how do we move forward as people under the sun, So we're down here. We got a limited view. God's up there. He's got a heck of a view, I'd say.
Right.
Just wondering at the wisdom in, I don't know, prayer is such a goofy, weird thing. And half the time when I pray, it's like, well, don't you know this already, God?
Well, yeah.
But
Okay, prayer.
Yeah.
You want to talk about prayer?
I do.
Prayer is, to make it fast statement easily, it's an acknowledgement that you're not in control. That's often the way I think about it. It's an acknowledgement out loud, usually, that you are not the head cheese. You're not the guy making the decisions. You're speaking and talking with your Father, or God or Jesus. You're speaking to someone else about your needs, about your thoughts, about your requests. So it's an acknowledgement that you're not in control. And I think that's pretty strong. It's not me. I'm not the ruler here.
right,
By any
yeah.
stretch of the imagination.
I'm kind of falling back now on that whole mountaintop imagery and just thinking I don't have that mountaintop view, but he does.
Right.
And that he opens this channel of communication, I mean, in one sense too, you're kind of saying, look, I'm the creature, you're the creator.
Yeah.
I'm down here, you're up there.
Right.
I don't know how this is going to go.
Right.
But you do.
Right.
So,
So I trust that you'll do something good.
yeah,
for me.
beckon me in the direction you want me to go.
That's right. That's right.
I don't know if the cliff's up ahead or if,
The rapids are coming.
Yeah. So just, beckon me, in a good direction.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh. Okay. Interesting. Just, because with this Ecclesiastes thing, it's kind of a depressing book.
Okay.
I'm going to say that. It's a little depressing. You can try to find some optimism in Ecclesiastes, and there might be a spot or two where you say, hey, that was kind of okay. But on the whole, it's really relatable. And I think that the book itself, I think non-Christians would be interested in reading it.
Oh, I think
That's
so.
what, especially if you like philosophy,
Sure.
and if you are kind of a thinker about your life and the world,
Right.
because it invites you in. It really doesn't have a whole lot to do with the narrative of the scripture or of the coming Messiah. There's that kind of language isn't in there. It's really more about look at your world,
Yeah.
and look at history and what's become of people in history, and now think about your own life, and if you're courageous enough, can you admit to yourself that your life is not that big, that you are down here.
Yeah.
That's what I kind of like about the book. Like it's very relatable, I think, and kind of honest in that way, if a bit harsh in its honesty.
Yeah.
But it pushes us to consider those questions about, what is my life worth? What is it worth? And obviously I'm biased in this, but I think that if I don't have someone giving my life value, kind of like currency, I don't know that it's worth anything. If there's not a God, if there's not a creator, if we are accidents, we are happy accidents on this, in this, world that was smashed, into existence, and none of, I won the lottery by being here, or lost it, depending how you look at it. Does my life have any value?
No.
I think you're kind of mad if you think it does.
Yeah.
How could you make that jump? But that's what the rest of the Bible is for, to say, hey, it actually does have value, because here's the image that you were made in. Here's the one who did craft you. That's so Proverbs 8 that came up in worship or in the sermon, I guess. Okay. And it's a great chapter. Read it if you haven't. But it's talking about kind of God's creative wisdom in creating the earth. Colossians, Paul in Colossians, he'll take what's written in Proverbs 8, and he'll use it to talk about Jesus. So he's making this leap to say that this wisdom that was foretold or talked about in Proverbs, right? Paul is saying that was Jesus, and all things were made through him. Yeah, so read Proverbs 8, and then read Colossians 1, and you'll see it's really obvious the connection he's making.
Proverbs 8.
Over to
Colossians 1.
Colossians 1, and you'll see that Jesus is the wisdom by which God created the world. And this is why Paul will say that all things were made, created in him, and through him all things were made. Right. And so in that sense, we're all, as Christians, and I think we talk and act this way, or I think so. I think we think this way, that life in general is valuable because we see the sacred in it. Right. We see that divine touch from above the sun, kind of reflected in some manner in all human life, even the most grotesque or rebellious. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of beauty down here. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you want to talk about beauty.
Yeah. Well, Don, I think I've talked enough, but I have more to hear from you. So keep working on those memories, and send me a carbon copy when you send it to your kids.
Okay. Will do.
All right, sounds good. Well, hey, thanks, folks, for joining us. As always, pleasure being with you, and Happy New Year.